May 21, 1575, 3,000 arquebuses, the most feared cavalry in Japan, charged directly into them. In 6 hours, the Takeda war machine was broken forever. How did Oda Nobunaga turn guns into an unstoppable force? And why did Katsuyori charge anyway?
Three 1,000 arquebuses. One afternoon. Japan's most feared cavalry charged directly into them. Why did Takeda Katsuyori ride straight into the guns he knew were waiting?
In 1573, Takeda Shingen died, and with him, the aura of invincibility the Takeda name carried. His son, Katsuyori, inherited the most feared cavalry army in Japan, the Red Armored Horsemen, who had broken every enemy they had ever faced. But Katsuyori also inherited a problem. He was not his father. Every general knew it. Every rival knew it. To solidify his rule, he had to win, and win decisively. In 1575, he chose to march on Nagashino Castle.
Oda Nobunaga had been fascinated by firearms since he first encountered Portuguese arquebuses in the 1550s. He grasped their potential faster than any other commander in Japan. By 1575, he had assembled the largest concentration of arquebuses ever seen on a Japanese battlefield. 3,000 guns, organized and drilled. Most commanders used firearms as a supplement to traditional forces. Nobunaga intended to use them as the main event. In May 1575, Katsuyori besieged Nagashino Castle with 15,000 men. The castle, commanded by Okudaira Sadamasa, was small, undermanned, and running out of food. Katsuyori expected it to fall quickly. It did not. Sadamasa held on, buying time for a message to reach Oda Nobunaga that the castle was desperate and that the Takeda were waiting. Each day the castle held was another day Nobunaga could reach them.
The message was carried by a man named Torii Suneemon. He slipped out of the besieged castle at night, swam through Takeda lines in a river, and reached Nobunaga with word that Nagashino could not last much longer. On his return, carrying the news that relief was coming, he was captured by the Takeda. They offered him his life if he stood before the castle walls and told the defenders that no help was coming. He agreed. Then he shouted the truth. The Takeda executed him immediately. The garrison held. Nobunaga moved. He covered the distance to Nagashino in a forced march his generals thought impossible, arriving with 38,000 men, including Tokugawa Ieyasu's allied troops, before Katsuyori had time to adjust. He chose a position at Shitaragahara, a marshy open field bisected by the Rengogawa River. He ordered his engineers to construct a long wooden palisade, a barrier specifically designed to stop cavalry charges, while his arquebusiers fired from behind it. The tactical innovation at Nagashino was not the gun itself. Guns had been used in Japanese warfare for decades. It was the coordination. Nobunaga organized his 3,000 arquebusiers into 3 rotating lines, 1 firing, 1 reloading, 1 ready. As long as the rotation held, the wall of fire would be continuous. No gaps, no pauses, no moment for cavalry to break through before the next volley arrived. It had never been done on this scale. Nobody knew if it would work.
On the night of May 20th, Katsuyori's senior generals held a war council. They urged him to withdraw. They could see the palisade. They knew what it meant. The math was visible. Cavalry versus arquebuses behind cover. His most experienced commanders, the men who had served under Shingen, told him directly, "This is a trap. Do not charge." Katsuyori listened, and then he ordered the attack anyway. Dawn broke on May 21st, 1575. The Takeda Cavalry formed up on the far side of the Rengogawa River. Red armor, battle standards, the finest horsemen in Japan. Across the field, behind their wooden palisade, Nobunaga's arquebusiers waited in their 3-line formation. Between them, open ground, a river, and the certainty of what was about to happen. The signal was given. The Takeda cavalry began to move. They charged. The first volley fired at range, cutting into the leading riders before they crossed the river. The second line loaded and fired as the first reloaded. The third line was ready before the second had finished. The sound was continuous. Not the sporadic crack of individual weapons, but a rolling, unbroken wall of fire that the cavalry rode into without let-up. Horses fell. Riders fell. The ground between the two armies became a killing field. The battle lasted 6 hours. By the end, the Takeda had lost an estimated 10,000 men, including 12 of their 24 most senior generals, the core of Shingen's original command structure. The cavalry that had never been broken was broken. Katsuyori escaped with the remnants of his army. He would never rebuild what he had lost at Nagashino. The war machine built by his father had been fed into Nobunaga's guns and destroyed. Katsuyori retreated north and spent 7 years trying to recover. He could not. Nobunaga and Ieyasu steadily dismantled what remained of Takeda territory, taking castle after castle. In 1582, cornered in the mountains of Kai province with almost no one left, Katsuyori committed suicide. The clan that had dominated central Japan for 2 generations ceased to exist. Nagashino had not just won a battle, it had set the timer on a dynasty's extinction. Modern historians have complicated the Nagashino story. The 3 rotating volley tactic, so cleanly described in later accounts, may have been partially retrospective. Archaeological evidence and contemporary sources suggest the battle was messier than the legend. The palisade was real. The concentration of guns was real. But the precisely choreographed rotation may have been more improvised, more chaotic than the classic account allows. The outcome, however, is not in dispute. For Nobunaga, Nagashino was a consolidation, not
a revolution. The last major obstacle to control of central Honshu was gone. He turned his attention westward and northward, systematically dismantling the remaining powers that stood between him and unification. The guns at Nagashino had bought him time and territory. 7 years later, at Honnoji, he would run out of time in a different way. Betrayed not by an enemy army, but by one of his own commanders.
Torii Suneemon was executed on a cross at the riverbank, visible to the defenders of Nagashino Castle. The garrison held 3 more days until Nobunaga's relief arrived. When the battle was over, Nobunaga rewarded the castle's commander generously. Torii Suneemon was enshrined as a model of samurai loyalty, a man who chose death over deception. His story has been told continuously for 4 centuries. It has outlasted the battle, the clan, and the era that produced it.
The lesson of Nagashino is not that guns defeated swords. It is that coordination defeated chaos. The Takeda Cavalry was not destroyed by technology. It was destroyed by discipline. Every element of the battle was available to other commanders. The guns, the palisade, the open ground. Only Nobunaga combined them into a system. The gap between having a weapon and weaponizing it is almost always the story of history. Nagashino is that gap made visible.
Why did Katsuyori charge when his generals said don't? The answer is political as much as military. He had inherited his father's army, but not his father's reputation. Every victory since Shingen's death had been questioned. Shingen would have done it better. Retreat at Nagashino meant surrendering the siege, retreating before his allies, and confirming what everyone already suspected. He needed to win. The charge was not tactical insanity. It was the act of a man who couldn't afford to lose more than he feared death.
Nagashino did not end the age of the samurai. Japan continued to use cavalry, swords, and traditional tactics for decades after 1575. What it ended was the myth of cavalry as an unstoppable force. Nobunaga had shown that disciplined firepower could stop anything. By the time Japan sealed its borders in the 1630s, the samurai had adapted. But the door Nobunaga opened at Nagashino would never fully close. 500 years later, the battle is still remembered as the day Japan turned a corner it could never turn back from.
Next time on Samurai Chronicles, the final destruction of the Toyotomi. In 1614, Tokugawa Ieyasu had everything he needed, except one thing. The last Toyotomi heir still lived. The siege of Osaka was not a battle for survival. It was a calculated act of political elimination. How did Japan's most patient strategist finally close the book on Hideyoshi's legacy?
If the clash of guns and cavalry at Nagashino gripped you, subscribe to Samurai Chronicles for a new episode every day. Drop a comment. Do you think Katsuyori made the wrong call, or was the charge the only move he had left? We'll see you in the next battle.